The fifth rejection arrived at 4:17 on a Thursday afternoon. I still remember the exact time. Not because it was the moment I lost a promotion, but because it was the moment I finally understood that my own family had already decided my place in the world. The message appeared on my company tablet while I stood inside the demonstration hangar at Falcon Joint Test Base. Hundreds of engineers, military officers, and executives surrounded the newest generation of autonomous aircraft. 12 Aegis Lattice drones sat on the runway outside the glass wall, their metallic surfaces reflecting the blue lights from the testing system. Everyone in that room believed they were witnessing the future of military technology. And they were right, because for the last 11 months, I had been the person who made that future possible. I was Adrian Cole. To most people, I was just a senior systems engineer at high-end defense. The quiet guy who stayed late. The guy who fixed problems nobody else understood. The guy who never fought for attention. But I knew the truth. Without me, Aegis Lattice would never have passed its final testing phase. I had rewritten the authentication framework when the entire system nearly failed. I rebuilt the communication protocols after 3 different teams gave up. I prevented a catastrophic error that could have caused the system to identify a rescue aircraft as a hostile target. My supervisor had already asked me what kind of office I wanted after my promotion. Everyone knew the program director position belonged to me. Everyone except the people who made the final decision. The stage lights turned on. Richard Voss, the CEO of High-End Defense, walked forward with a smile. Today marks a historic moment, he announced. The Aegis Lattice program requires leadership, vision, and someone who understands both technology and military strategy. The crowd applauded. I stood near the control console I had personally rebuilt 3 nights earlier. Then Richard looked toward the entrance. Please welcome the new director of the Aegis Lattice program. My fingers tightened. I expected my name. Instead, I heard Daniel Cole. For a second, I thought I misunderstood. Then my younger brother walked onto the stage, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, smiling confidently, accepting applause for a position everyone knew I had earned. The room erupted. People congratulated him. Executives shook his hand. Cameras flashed. And behind him, displayed on the massive screen, were 3 diagrams. My diagrams, the same designs I created years ago, the same security architecture I spent thousands of hours developing. Now they were being presented as part of Daniel's leadership vision. I didn't move. I didn't say anything, because after 5 times, you learn something. You learn that anger doesn't change reality. A woman from Human Resources approached me after the ceremony. Her expression told me everything before she even spoke. Adrian. She lowered her voice. I'm sorry. I looked at the document in her hand. Government approval. She nodded. The Aegis project required military confidence before anyone could become director. Officially, it wasn't a veto, but everyone knew one person's recommendation could decide everything. I took the report. At the bottom was the signature. Victoria Cole. My mother. The woman who raised me. The woman who once told me I could achieve anything. The woman who had now blocked my promotion for the 5th time. I read the evaluation. Adrian Cole demonstrates exceptional technical ability, but lacks the executive judgment required to lead a mission-critical program. I almost laughed, because I knew exactly what that sentence meant. It didn't mean I wasn't capable. It meant someone had already decided I wasn't allowed to rise. I found my mother 20 minutes later inside the executive lounge. She was standing with Daniel. They looked like a perfect team, the brilliant military executive and her talented younger son. When I entered, Daniel smiled. Brother. The way he said it bothered me, not because it sounded friendly, because it sounded like he had already won. My mother looked at the report in my hand. Adrian. Not here. I looked around. Senior officers sat nearby. Executives were drinking coffee. People who needed to hear the truth. Where would you prefer? I asked. The room where you signed the evaluation. My mother's expression changed slightly. Only for a moment. Then the same calm expression returned. Your promotion was never guaranteed. I stared at her. Really, I placed the 5 previous evaluations on the table. The first time, I lacked management experience. I put down the first document. The second time, my communication style was considered too direct. The second document. The third time, I was told I was better suited for technical work. The fourth time, there were concerns about my leadership approach. The fourth, and now the fifth time, I tapped the newest report. I somehow still have the exact weaknesses I had before. Daniel leaned back. Maybe the evaluations are trying to tell you something. I looked at him, the same brother whose entire presentation was built on my work. Are you saying I don't deserve this position? Daniel shrugged. I'm saying leadership is different from writing code. My mother didn't correct him. That hurt more than anything, because I didn't expect Daniel to understand. But I expected my mother to. I turned toward her. Did you write that I lacked leadership ability? She didn't answer immediately. That silence was enough. You did, Adrian. I was trying to protect you. I almost smiled. Protect me. Yes. She stepped closer. You have always been brilliant. But brilliance isn't everything. Daniel understands people. He understands strategy. I looked at my brother, the man standing on a stage because of my work. Strategy. I asked quietly, is that what we call taking credit now? Daniel's expression hardened. My mother's voice became colder. Enough. There it was. The voice she used when she wasn't speaking to her son. She was speaking to an employee. You need to accept reality. Reality. That word stayed in my mind, because my entire life, I had accepted reality. I accepted when Daniel received more attention. I accepted when my achievements were called team success. I accepted when my mother said I was talented but not ready. I accepted everything, because I believed family was different. But standing there, watching my mother defend the person who benefited from my sacrifice, I finally understood. She didn't believe I was incapable. She believed I belonged behind Daniel. That night, I went back to my house, the same house my mother helped me buy after my father's death, the same place where I had spent years working on inventions that changed military technology. I entered my study. On the desk was a resignation letter. I wrote it after the fourth rejection. Back then, I wasn't ready to send it. I still hoped something would change. I still hoped my mother would finally see me. I picked up the pen, changed the date, signed my name, Adrian Cole. For years, I thought losing that promotion would be the thing that broke me. I was wrong. The promotion wasn't what I lost that day. It was my illusion, the illusion that my family wanted me to succeed. The next morning, I would walk away from high-end defense. They thought they were losing an engineer. They had no idea they were losing the person who built the foundation of their entire future. And soon, they would discover exactly what they had thrown away. For 13 years, I believed my mother was my biggest supporter. I was wrong. The woman who taught me how to dream was also the person who slowly convinced me I was never meant to stand in the spotlight. That night, after the fifth rejection, I sat alone in my study staring at my old engineering notebooks. Every page represented a moment when I had sacrificed something. Sleep, time, opportunities, even family moments. I remembered being 23 years old, sitting in my father's hospital room while designing the first version of the Orpheus security system. My father had looked at my laptop and smiled. Adrian. I looked up. You know what your problem is? I laughed. What? You think being useful is enough? I didn't understand what he meant back then. I thought if I worked hard enough, people would eventually recognize me. I thought results mattered more than recognition. But my father understood something I didn't. The world doesn't always reward the person who creates something. Sometimes it rewards the person standing in front of the camera. And for years, that person had always been Daniel. The next morning, I went to my mother's office. Victoria Cole had always been a powerful woman. Even before joining high-end defense, she was respected throughout the military industry. People listened when she spoke. Executives changed their decisions based on her opinions. Generals valued her judgment, including me. That was the problem. I respected her so much that I ignored what was happening right in front of me. When I entered her office, she didn't look surprised. She already knew I would come. Sit down, Adrian. I stayed standing. I want to understand something. She closed the folder in front of her. What? Her eyebrows moved slightly. Why what? Why did you block me? Silence. Then she sighed. I didn't block you. I almost laughed. You signed the evaluation. Yes, 5 times. Her expression became serious. And every time, I gave my honest assessment. Honest. That word again. Everyone who hurt me used that word. I repaired the authentication failure that almost destroyed Aegis. I know. I redesigned the communication system. I know. I solved problems your own engineers couldn't solve. I know. Her answer surprised me, because she wasn't denying my achievements. She knew exactly what I had done. Then why? I asked. My mother looked at me for several seconds. Then she said, because you are not ready. The same sentence. The same excuse. 5 different years. 5 different opportunities. The answer never changed. Not ready for what? Leadership. I shook my head. You don't think I can lead? No. She corrected me. I think you lead differently. What does that mean? She stood and walked toward the window. Adrian, you have always been brilliant, but you focus too much on details. Details. I stared at her. The details are what keep aircraft from falling out of the sky. She didn't respond. I continued. The details are what prevent military systems from making mistakes. This isn't about engineering. Exactly. I stepped closer. This is about what you think leadership looks like. My mother turned around. Leadership requires people skills. And Daniel has those. Her silence answered. I smiled bitterly. Daniel was good with people. Everyone loved him. He remembered birthdays. He attended meetings. He knew exactly what to say. But when a system failed, when millions of dollars of technology was at risk, when one mistake could cost lives, they called me, not Daniel, Adrian. My mother's voice softened. I am trying to help you. No, I shook my head. You are trying to keep me where you think I belong. Her expression changed. For the first time, I saw anger. You think I don't want you to succeed. I think you want me to succeed in a way that doesn't threaten Daniel. The room became silent, because I had finally said the thing everyone avoided. Daniel was not my mother's favorite because he was better. He was her favorite because he was easier. He didn't challenge her. He didn't question her decisions. He made her feel like the smartest person in the room. I did the opposite. I asked questions. I found problems. I pointed out mistakes. And powerful people don't always like the person who finds their mistakes. The office door opened. Daniel walked in. Of course he did. He always appeared when things were going his way. Mom, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Then he looked at me. Everything okay? I looked at him. The same confident smile. The same expression of someone who believed he deserved everything. Perfect, I said. Daniel frowned. Really? Yes. I picked up the rejection documents. Actually, you should be proud. He smiled. I am. No. I looked directly at him. You should be proud because you finally achieved something. His smile disappeared. My mother immediately stepped in. Adrian. But I wasn't angry anymore. Something inside me had changed. I wasn't fighting for approval. I was accepting reality. Daniel didn't steal my position. My mother gave it to him. That evening, I opened my company records. Gray Haven Technologies. The company I created 9 years ago. The company nobody in my family knew the true value of. When I founded Gray Haven, I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was ashamed, because I didn't care about money or status. I only wanted to build technology that mattered. At the time, I owned the majority of the company. But when my father's health declined, when my mother's career demanded more attention, when Daniel needed support, I stepped away. I let others manage it. I chose family over ambition. I thought someday they would understand. I was wrong. My phone rang. It was Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Brother. His voice sounded unusually confident. Are you okay? I'm fine. You know, I hope you don't take this personally. I looked at the Gray Haven documents on my desk. Take what personally? The promotion. I stayed silent. Daniel continued. Mom made the right decision. There it was. The sentence I expected. You're an incredible engineer, Adrian. But not everyone is meant to lead. I closed my eyes, because those words weren't new. My mother said the same thing. I finally understood. They had repeated it so many times, that they started believing it. Daniel, "Do you know why you got that position?" He laughed. "Because I earned it." I looked at the Grey Haven logo on my screen. A company worth billions. Built from my ideas. Built from my work. Built from my sacrifices. "No," I said quietly. "You got it because I spent years making sure you had something to stand on." The line went silent. For the first time, Daniel didn't know what to say. I ended the call. Then I opened the resignation letter again. This time, I didn't hesitate. Tomorrow morning, I would leave high in defense. And when I left, I wouldn't be taking revenge. I would simply stop protecting people who never protected me. Because the truth was simple. My family didn't know they had pushed me away. They thought they had removed a problem. They didn't realize they had just released their greatest threat. The next morning, I arrived at High in Defense earlier than usual. Not because I wanted to say goodbye, but because I wanted to leave with dignity. For years, this building had been my second home. I knew every hallway, every security checkpoint, every late-night conversation between engineers who refused to give up. I remembered sleeping in the laboratory during the first Aegis Laddie's development phase. I remembered fixing problems while everyone else had already gone home. I remembered believing that one day, all of it would mean something. I was wrong. At least, I was wrong about who would recognize it. At 8 a.m., I walked into the Human Resources office. Melissa Kane, the HR director, looked up when she saw me. Her expression immediately changed. She knew. Everyone knew. News traveled fast inside a company when someone was replaced, especially when that someone was supposed to become the next program director. "Adrian." She stood up. "Are you sure about this?" I placed my resignation letter on the desk. "Yes." She looked at the paper, then back at me. "You understand this is permanent?" "I do. Your entire career is here." I smiled slightly. "No." I looked around the office. "My career was never here." She didn't understand. Most people didn't. They thought High in Defense created my success. They didn't know High in Defense was only one chapter of my story. Melissa lowered her voice. "Adrian, Richard wants to speak with you." Of course he did. The CEO. The man who had watched my work become someone else's achievement. I picked up my badge. Let's get it over with. Richard Voss's office overlooked the entire Falcon Joint Test Base. It was designed to make people feel small. Huge windows, expensive furniture, walls covered with photographs of successful projects. Projects built by thousands of engineers. People like me. Richard stood beside his desk. He wasn't angry. That surprised me. He looked disappointed. "Adrian." I placed my badge on his desk. "My resignation is effective today." He stared at it. "You're making an emotional decision." "No." I shook my head. "I'm making the first logical decision I've made in years." Richard sighed. "Look, I understand you're frustrated." Frustrated. I looked at him. "Richard, my work was used to promote someone else 5 times. He remained silent. That silence told me enough. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. "You could still have a future here." I almost laughed. "A future?" "Yes." He leaned forward. "We can create a new position." "What position?" "Principal engineer." There it was. The same offer they always gave me. More responsibility. More work. No authority. "No." Richard frowned. "You haven't even heard the details." "I don't need to." I looked directly at him. "After the 3rd rejection, you offered me a bonus." He looked away. "After the 4th rejection, you offered me a better title." I continued. "And after the 5th rejection, you gave my position to Daniel." His expression hardened. "Daniel is capable." I never said he wasn't. That surprised him. Because everyone expected jealousy, anger, a fight. But I wasn't fighting my brother anymore. I was done fighting people who benefited from my silence. "The problem isn't that Daniel got promoted," I said. "The problem is that everyone knew why." Richard didn't answer. Because he knew. Everyone knew. Before I left, I walked through the engineering floor one last time. The atmosphere changed when people saw me. Conversations stopped. People looked away. Not because they didn't care. Because they didn't know what to say. My team gathered near my desk. Priya Shah, my deputy engineer, looked devastated. "Adrian." She lowered her voice. "Are you really leaving?" I nodded. She looked toward Daniel's new office. This isn't right. I smiled. Maybe. She looked confused. Maybe. Yes. I packed my things into a cardboard box. My entire life. I thought fairness meant waiting for people to notice. I placed my old engineering notebook inside. But sometimes fairness means knowing when to stop waiting. Priya's eyes became emotional. You built this project. No. I corrected her. We built it. Then I handed her a sealed folder. What is this? Everything needed for a smooth transition. She looked shocked. You're still helping them. I looked at the Aegis control room through the glass. I care about the mission. I paused. But I don't belong here anymore. As I walked toward the elevator, Daniel appeared. Of course he did. He stood there wearing the same confident expression from yesterday. Leaving already. I pressed the elevator button. Yes. He smiled. I thought you would fight harder. I looked at him. Fight for what? My position. I shook my head. You still don't understand. Daniel's smile faded. Understand what? I stepped closer. You think I lost because you won. The elevator doors opened. But the truth is, I picked up my box. I stopped playing a game where the rules were written against me. Daniel watched me enter. Before the doors closed, he said, "You'll come back." I looked at him. Because people like you need projects like Aegis. I smiled. No. The doors began closing. Projects like Aegis needed people like me. Outside the building, I placed my box in my car. Inside was everything I had left behind. My father's photograph. A coffee mug from my first year at Hyan. 2 engineering textbooks. And an old brass plaque. Grey Haven Technologies. Most people thought it was just an old company name. They didn't know what it represented. 9 years ago, before joining Hyan Defense, I created Grey Haven, a technology company built around my own research. A company that quietly developed security systems, artificial intelligence frameworks, and defense technologies. I never talked about it. I never needed to, because I never cared about being rich. I cared about building something meaningful. But now, I needed to remember something important. My mother chose Daniel because she thought he was the future of the Cole family. She didn't know the future had already been built. By me. When I arrived at my apartment, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for several seconds, then answered. Adrian. Her voice was calm, almost like nothing happened. Richard told me you resigned. Yes. You need to reconsider. I looked out the window. No. Pause. Your father would be disappointed. That sentence hurt, because she knew exactly where to strike. I closed my eyes. My father would be disappointed that his son spent 13 years trying to earn respect from people who should have given it freely. Silence. Then she said, "You're being dramatic." I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I finally heard the truth. She still didn't understand. Goodbye, Mom. Adrian. I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I didn't wait for her permission. That evening, I opened the Grey Haven Company records. A message was already waiting. Welcome back, founder. I stared at those words. Founder. Title I had forgotten. A position nobody could take away. Then another message appeared. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The team is ready for your return. I leaned back. For years, I had hidden behind the role of an engineer. I let others take credit. I let others stand in front. But that was over. Tomorrow, I would walk back into Grey Haven, and the world would finally learn the truth. The man they thought they had pushed aside was the man who built everything they depended on. For the first time in 13 years, I woke up without an alarm. No emergency meetings. No midnight calls. No engineers waiting for me to solve problems someone else created. Just silence. And strangely, that silence felt heavier than any responsibility I had carried at Hyan Defense. For years, I believed my purpose was tied to one project, Aegis Lattice, the system I helped create, the technology one protected, the people I trusted. But after leaving, I finally understood something. I wasn't losing my career. I was returning to my life. Grey Haven Technologies was located outside Reno. Inside a building most people would drive past without noticing. There was no giant company logo, no expensive entrance, no security guards checking everyone who entered. That was intentional. Grey Haven was never built to impress people. It was built to solve problems. When I walked through the doors that morning, I expected things to feel different. Instead, everything felt strangely familiar. The same engineers, the same laboratories, the same research rooms where impossible ideas became real technology. Then someone shouted, "Look who finally decided to come back." I turned around. Elena Ward stood there, dark suit, confident expression, the same person who had been with me since the beginning. She wasn't just an employee. She was the first person who believed in my vision. 6 years ago, when I stepped away from Grey Haven to focus on high-end defense and my family, Elena became the company's CEO. She was the reason Grey Haven continued growing. She walked toward me with a small smile. "Welcome home, founder." I looked at the people standing behind her. 32 employees. Some I knew, some I didn't, but all of them were looking at me like I belonged there. Because I did. "I thought you would be angry," I said. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Angry?" She crossed her arms. "You abandoned a billion-dollar company to work for another company that didn't appreciate you." I smiled. "That sounds worse when you say it like that." Because it was worse. She handed me a tablet. "Grey Haven never stopped being yours." I looked at the information. Revenue growth, patent expansions, government contracts, medical robotics, aviation security, artificial intelligence. I scrolled through the numbers. I had known Grey Haven was successful, but I hadn't realized how far it had gone. "You built all this?" Elena shook her head. "No." She looked at the employees behind her. "We built it." That sentence stayed with me, because it was exactly what I had told Priya before leaving Hyan. A leader didn't create everything alone. A leader created people who could continue without him. We entered the conference room. The Grey Haven board was waiting. For the first time in years, I wasn't sitting at the side of the table. I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide whether I was qualified. I was at the head. Elena opened the meeting. "Before we discuss the future, there is something everyone needs to understand." She looked at me. "Adrian Cole never stopped being the technical authority behind Grey Haven." A board member nodded. "We knew you were brilliant." I smiled slightly. "No." I looked around the room. "You knew I was an engineer." The room became quiet. "There's a difference." I opened the presentation. On the screen appeared the original Grey Haven architecture, the foundation of everything: security systems, authentication models, defense protocols, the same technology that Hyan Defense had been using for years. But there was something they didn't know, something my own family didn't know. I wasn't just another engineer working on military systems. I was the person who created the foundation those systems were built on. Meanwhile, at Hyan Defense, things were already starting to fall apart. I didn't know it yet, but the company I left behind was about to discover how much it depended on me. Daniel walked into the Aegis Operations Center that morning wearing a confident smile. The same smile he wore when he accepted the promotion. Executives gathered around him. Everyone expected him to prove they made the right decision. Richard Voss stood beside him. "This is your opportunity, Daniel." Daniel nodded. "I know." On the large screen were 12 Aegis autonomous aircraft, ready for final testing. The entire program depended on this moment. Daniel looked at the engineers. "Begin activation." The system started. The aircraft connected. The first test appeared successful. Then, the warning appeared. Authentication failure. Everyone froze. Daniel frowned. "What happened?" An engineer checked the system. "It's a synchronization issue. Fix it." The engineer hesitated. "Sir, what? This isn't a normal error." The room became quiet. "What do you mean?" The engineer swallowed. "The system is rejecting the command structure." Daniel stepped forward. "I need access." The engineer looked uncomfortable. "Only the original architecture authority can override this." Richard's expression changed. "Who?" The engineer looked at the screen, then answered, "Adrian Cole." Daniel stared. For the first time since taking the position, he looked uncertain. "No." He shook his head. "Adrian doesn't work here anymore." The engineer didn't respond, because everyone in that room knew something Daniel didn't want to admit. Adrian wasn't just someone who worked on Aegis. He was the reason Aegis existed. at Grey Haven. I was reviewing new projects when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. Dr. Cole. A serious voice came through. This is General Margaret Hale from the Air Force. I immediately stood. A general didn't call ordinary engineers. I understand you recently left high in defense. Yes. There was a pause. Then she said, we have a problem with Aegis laddies. I looked out the window. For a moment, I said nothing, because I already knew. What's the problem? The system entered emergency safe mode during testing. I closed my eyes. The exact scenario I had warned them about. The exact mistake I had tried to prevent. General. Yes. You need to stop all further testing. We already tried. Her voice became more serious. The system will not accept any recovery command. Silence. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Dr. Cole, are you able to restore it? I looked at the Grey Haven logo on the wall. For years, I protected a company that never valued me. For years, I protected people who chose someone else. But now, the same people who pushed me away needed me. I answered calmly, yes. A pause. But before I help, I looked at the old Grey Haven plaque sitting on my desk. They need to understand something. What? I smiled slightly. The person they replaced was the person they needed all along. The next morning, I would return to Falcon Joint Test Base. But this time, I wouldn't walk in as an employee. I wouldn't stand behind a console. I wouldn't wait for someone else's approval. This time, I would walk in as the person who built the entire system. And everyone who underestimated me would finally learn my real name. The Falcon Joint Test Base had never felt this quiet. Not because there were fewer people, because everyone was afraid. 2 days earlier, the Aegis Laddies program had been the pride of high-end defense. A symbol of technological superiority. Project worth billions. A system that military leaders believed would redefine autonomous warfare. Now, 12 aircraft sat motionless on the runway. The entire program was frozen, and nobody knew how to fix it, except one person, the same person they had pushed away. When I arrived at the base, I immediately noticed the difference. The last time I walked through these gates, I was an employee, someone who needed permission, someone whose opinions could be ignored. Today, security officers stopped talking when my car entered the restricted area. They didn't know who I was. Not yet, but they knew someone important had arrived. Elena sat beside me in the car. She looked through the window at the facility. You realize everyone here thinks you're coming back to save them. I looked at the buildings ahead. I'm not saving them. She glanced at me. No. I shook my head. I'm preventing a system failure from hurting innocent people. That was always the difference. I wasn't here because I wanted revenge. I wasn't here because I wanted to prove I was better. I was here because the technology mattered. The mission mattered, even if the people behind it didn't. At the entrance, a security officer checked our credentials. Then his expression changed. He looked at the tablet, then looked at me. Dr. Cole. Yes. He immediately stepped aside. Welcome back. I almost smiled. Welcome back. 2 words. Words I never heard at high-end defense. Not from my mother. Not from Daniel. Not from anyone who benefited from my work. Inside Building 19, the emergency conference room was already full. Executives, military officers, engineers. Everyone who had once watched Daniel receive my promotion was now sitting in silence. Richard Voss was there. His expression changed the moment he saw me. Not anger, not confidence, concern. Adrian. I nodded. Richard. He looked uncomfortable. You came. You called. A simple answer. But everyone in the room understood what it meant. I wasn't returning because they deserved me. I was returning because the system needed me. Then I saw her. My mother, Victoria Cole. She stood near the conference table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The last time we saw each other, she told me I wasn't ready to lead. Now she was looking at me because she needed me. Adrian. Her voice was softer than usual. I noticed. She wasn't talking like a board member. She was talking like a mother. But something inside me had changed. A few days ago, that would have been enough. Now, it wasn't. Where is Daniel? I asked. The room became silent. My mother looked away. He is reviewing the system logs. I almost laughed. Of course. Even now, they were protecting him. Daniel entered 5 minutes later. He looked exhausted. For the first time in my life, I saw fear on his face. Not confidence. Not arrogance. Fear. He looked at me. You came. I looked at him. Yes. He glanced around. I didn't expect you to help. He didn't answer, because we both knew. He thought I would enjoy watching him fail. Maybe part of me did, but not enough to ignore the consequences. What happened? Daniel walked toward the screen. The system entered safe mode during testing. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. An update was deployed. Who approved it? Nobody answered. I looked at Daniel. Who? He looked away. Finally, I did. There it was. The truth. Not the whole truth, but the beginning. What update? Daniel explained the modification. A small change. A shortcut. A way to make the system respond faster. I stared at the data. Then I understood. You changed the authentication sequence. Daniel frowned. It was a minor adjustment. No. I pointed at the screen. It wasn't minor. Everyone became silent. You changed the order of identity verification. Daniel crossed his arms, which improved efficiency. No. I looked at him. It destroyed the entire security model. My mother's expression changed. Adrian. She stepped forward. Are you sure? That question hurt. Not because she asked, because she had asked it so many times before. Not, can you solve this? But, are you sure you know what you're doing? I looked at her. Mom. I spoke calmly. The reason this system exists is because I designed it to prevent exactly this situation. Nobody moved. Suddenly, the conference room door opened. Everyone turned. A military officer entered. Behind him was a woman wearing a decorated general's uniform. The entire room immediately stood. Lieutenant General Margaret Hale, one of the highest-ranking officers overseeing the program. She walked directly toward the table. I understand Dr. Cole has arrived. Richard nodded. Yes, General. She looked at me, then smiled slightly. Finally, everyone looked confused, especially my mother. The general opened a folder. Inside were classified documents. Before we discuss recovery procedures, there is something everyone in this room needs to understand. She placed the folder on the table. For years, many of you believed Adrian Cole was simply a senior engineer at High-End Defense. Silence. The general continued. That assumption was incorrect. Daniel's face changed. Richard froze. My mother stared at the general. What do you mean? General Hale looked at me, then back at them. Adrian Cole is the original architect of the Orpheus program. Nobody spoke. The room felt frozen. She continued. The foundation of Aegis Lattice was created from his research. A few engineers looked at each other. Richard slowly stood. That can't be right. The general looked at him. It is documented. She placed another file on the table. Patent records. Another. Government authorization records. Another. Original design approval. Every document had my name. Not Daniel's. Not High-End Defense. Mine. My mother stared at the papers. I watched her expression change. For years, she looked at me as a talented engineer, a useful employee, someone who needed guidance. Now she was seeing something different. She was seeing the person she had spent years underestimating. Daniel looked at the documents, then at me. His voice was quiet. You knew. I looked at him. Knew what? That you were this important. I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was painful. I knew what I built, I said, but I never thought my own family would need proof before believing me. Daniel looked down. For once, he had nothing to say. General Hale turned toward the screen. The immediate problem remains. She pointed at the frozen aircraft data. Aegis Lattice is locked. Everyone looked at me. The same people who once ignored my warnings. The same people who believed Daniel was the future. Now they were waiting for my answer. I walked toward the control panel. My hands touched the keyboard. The system recognized my authorization. A message appeared. Orpheus Design Authority confirmed. The room went silent. Nobody needed an explanation. The machine itself had already answered. I looked back at them. My system did exactly what it was designed to do. Richard swallowed. What does that mean? It means the system protected itself. I looked at Daniel. The failure wasn't caused by the technology. A pause. It was caused by someone who changed something they didn't understand. For the first time in years, nobody interrupted me. Nobody questioned whether I belonged. Nobody told me I was better suited to stay behind the scenes. Because the truth was finally impossible to ignore. The son they considered less valuable was the person who built the future they depended on. And tomorrow, when the investigation began, everyone would discover exactly how much they had lost when they chose Daniel over me. The moment the words appeared on the screen, nobody in the room spoke. Orpheus Design Authority confirmed. The system had answered a question nobody wanted to ask. Who was the person truly responsible for Aegis Laddies? Not Daniel. Not high-end defense. Not the executives who stood on stage taking credit. Me, Adrian Cole, the person they had called a talented engineer. The person they said was not ready to lead. The person my own mother believed should stay behind my younger brother. For years, I watched Daniel receive opportunities that should have been mine. But I never hated him. That was the strange part. Daniel was my brother. We grew up in the same house. We lost our father together. I remembered teaching him how to ride a bike. I remembered helping him with his college applications. I remembered staying up all night helping him prepare presentations. I never wanted to see him fail. I only wanted him to stop pretending he succeeded alone. But now, standing inside that conference room, I realized something. Daniel didn't just accept my achievements. He built his entire identity on them. General Hale looked at the system reports. Dr. Cole, explain what happened. I stepped toward the screen. The current failure wasn't caused by the original architecture. I opened the security logs. The original system had 3 independent verification layers. The room watched quietly. Contractor certification, government authorization, independent architecture verification. I pointed at the last section. This final layer exists to prevent unauthorized modifications from becoming operational. Richard frowned. So someone changed the system. Yes. His expression became serious. Who? Nobody answered, but everyone looked toward Daniel. Daniel immediately stepped forward. Wait. His voice was defensive. This is unfair. I looked at him. Unfair. Yes. He pointed at the screen. You're making it sound like I destroyed the system. You modified the system. I improved it. No. My voice remained calm. You removed a safety requirement because you believed it slowed down performance. Daniel's face changed. How do you know that? Because I built it. I wanted to say those words, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I opened the comparison file, the original authentication sequence, then another file, the current version. The difference appeared. Everyone could see it. A small change. 1 line of code, but that 1 line changed everything. An engineer near the back whispered, "That bypasses identity confirmation." Another engineer looked terrified. During autonomous operation, that could create duplicate authorization. Exactly. The thing I had spent years preventing. The thing I warned them about. The thing they ignored. My mother looked at Daniel. Daniel. Her voice was different. Not angry. Confused. Did you make this change? Daniel looked uncomfortable. I approved the update. He looked at the executives around him. Then at me. Because the system was too slow. I stared at him. The system was designed to be careful. Daniel shook his head. And that's the problem. There it was. The difference between us. Daniel saw safety as an obstacle. I saw safety as the reason the system existed. General Hale walked closer. Major Cole. Daniel straightened. Yes, General. Who reviewed this modification. Daniel hesitated. The room became quiet. Nobody liked silence during an investigation, because silence usually meant someone was hiding something. My team reviewed it. Your team? Yes. Was Dr. Cole involved? Daniel didn't answer. The general didn't need him to. Everyone already knew. No. She looked at the documents. Interesting. She turned toward Richard. You promoted someone to lead a national defense program without consulting the person who created the architecture. Richard looked uncomfortable. He was no longer part of high-end defense. The general's expression hardened. That was your decision. Nobody responded. The investigation lasted for hours, and every hour revealed something worse. Daniel's success story started falling apart. The presentations, the awards, the executive meetings, the reputation, everything, because behind every achievement was the same question. Who created the foundation? The answer was always the same: me. Then came the discovery that changed everything. An investigator found archived test reports, 47 of them, 47 failed simulations, 47 warnings that were never properly reported. The room became silent as the documents appeared. I looked at Daniel. He looked away. The investigator spoke. These failures occurred before the current system freeze. Richard frowned. Why weren't they reported? Nobody answered. The investigator continued. Several reports were classified as minor operational issues instead of system-level failures. My hands tightened, because I understood what that meant. Someone had hidden problems to make the project look successful. Someone had chosen numbers over safety. My mother finally spoke. Daniel. Her voice was barely audible. Did you know about this? Daniel looked at her. For the first time, he didn't look confident. He looked like a child who had been caught lying. I was trying to keep the project moving. My mother stared at him. You hid failures. No. He immediately answered, then stopped, because everyone knew. Yes. He lowered his voice. But I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I looked at him, and strangely, I felt disappointed. Not angry, disappointed, because somewhere deep down, I still hoped he would admit the truth before being forced. General Hale turned toward me. Dr. Cole. Yes. You warned the program about this risk. Yes. When? Before I resigned. She looked through the records, then found it. My warning. The exact document I sent. The exact message that was ignored. At the bottom, my mother's digital approval. Victoria Cole. The room became completely silent, because now everyone understood. This wasn't a technical disagreement. This wasn't a misunderstanding. The warning existed. The proof existed. The person who could have prevented the disaster had tried. But nobody listened. My mother looked at the document, then at me. Adrian. Her voice cracked. I didn't know. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt something worse. Sadness. Because I realized my mother had spent years protecting Daniel. But she never once protected me. You didn't know. I repeated. No. I shook my head. You didn't want to know. She froze. Because she knew I was right. Daniel was removed from the project pending investigation. High-end Defense lost control of the recovery process. And the same people who once ignored my opinions now waited for my instructions. But the biggest change wasn't happening inside the company. It was happening inside my family. My mother finally understood the truth. The son she thought needed to prove himself was the son who had been carrying everyone else for years. And the son she protected was the reason everything almost collapsed. That evening, as I left Falcon Joint Test Base, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. A week ago, I would have answered immediately. Now I waited. Then I accepted. Adrian. Her voice was quiet, different. For the first time, she didn't sound like a commander. She sounded like a mother. I need to talk to you. I looked at the base behind me, the place where I spent years proving myself to people who refused to see me. What do you want to talk about? There was a long pause. Then she said, I think I made a mistake. I closed my eyes, because those words were the ones I had waited years to hear. But now, they came too late. For most of my life, I wanted to hear one sentence from my mother. Not a promotion, not an apology, not praise in front of other people. Just one simple sentence. Adrian, I believe in you. I waited for that sentence through childhood, through university, through every sleepless night inside a laboratory, through every impossible problem I solved. But my mother never said it, because in her mind, believing in me meant protecting me from failure. And protecting me meant keeping me away from the position I had earned. The next morning, I returned to Grey Haven. The difference between Grey Haven and High-End Defense was impossible to ignore. At High-End, I spent years proving I belonged. At Grey Haven, nobody questioned it. They didn't care about my title. They cared about my ideas. They cared about solving problems. They cared about building something meaningful. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Elena found me in the main laboratory. She handed me a coffee, black. I looked at it. You remembered. She smiled. Adrian, I worked with you for 6 years. I remember everything. I looked at the engineers around the room. Everyone was focused. Everyone was working. Nobody was waiting for someone powerful to tell them they were valuable. This place changed. Elena nodded. It had to, because I left. No. She looked at me. Because you came back. I didn't answer, because that sentence felt strange. For years, I believed my absence didn't matter. I believed companies moved on. People moved on. Maybe I was wrong. Later that afternoon, General Hale called. The Aegis investigation had officially started. The preliminary results were exactly what we expected. Daniel's modification caused the security failure. But the investigation was bigger than one mistake. Because the deeper question was, how did someone without full technical authority make such a dangerous change? The answer was uncomfortable, because too many people allowed it. Too many people wanted success more than they wanted safety. Dr. Cole. General Hale's voice came through the phone. Yes, General. The Air Force wants Grey Haven involved in the recovery process. I looked at the documents on my desk. Under what conditions? There was a pause. You're negotiating. I smiled slightly. No, I looked out the window. I'm making sure the same mistake doesn't happen twice. The general was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that sounds exactly like the person who designed Aegis. I almost laughed. Funny, the military remembered who I was. My own family didn't. That evening, my mother came to Grey Haven. No assistant, no executives, no Daniel, just her, Victoria Cole. For the first time in years, she looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. She stood in the lobby, looking at the company logo on the wall. Grey Haven Technologies, the company she barely knew existed, the company her son built. Elena came to inform me, your mother is here. I was silent. She wants to see you. I looked at the clock, then nodded. Send her in. She entered my office slowly. Her eyes moved around the room. The awards, the patents, the photographs, the people working outside, everything she never asked about. You built all this. It wasn't a question. I sat behind my desk. Yes. She touched one of the framed patents. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her. That question surprised me. Not because she asked, because she thought that was the important question. Would it have changed anything? She froze. I continued. If you knew I owned Grey Haven, would you have believed my evaluations? She looked away. I don't know. That answer hurt, because it was honest. And honesty from her was something I rarely received. She sat across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I made mistakes. I looked at her. Yes. She seemed surprised. Maybe she expected me to comfort her. Maybe she expected me to say it was okay. But it wasn't. I thought I was protecting the family. She continued, I thought Daniel needed more support. I nodded. He did. She looked at me, but not at my expense. Her expression changed. Because she knew. You always had confidence. She whispered, you always had ability. Then why did you stop me? She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, because I was afraid. That was the first thing she said that I didn't expect. Afraid of what? She looked down. After your father died, I felt responsible for keeping this family together. I listened. Daniel needed someone to guide him. He struggled more than you did. I nodded. That became your excuse. Her eyes became wet. I thought you were strong enough to handle disappointment. I leaned back, and Daniel wasn't. Silence. That silence was the answer. For years, everyone praised me for being strong, but nobody asked why I had to be. They saw that I could handle pain, so they gave me more. They saw that I could solve problems, so they gave me theirs. They saw that I didn't complain, so they assumed I wasn't hurting. My mother looked at me. I want you to come back. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Come back. Back to Hyan. Back to the family. Back to being the person they needed. I stared at her. Come back as what? She hesitated. the head of the Aegis program. I almost smiled, because that was exactly what I wanted years ago. The position, the recognition, the chance to prove myself. But now, I didn't need it anymore. Mom, I spoke quietly. I spent years trying to get that position. I know. No. I shook my head. You don't. She looked at me. I wasn't trying to become director. I paused. I was trying to know that my own family believed I was capable. Her eyes filled with regret. I can fix this, she said. I can tell the board what happened. I looked at her. That isn't the point. Then what is? The point is that you only believe me now because someone else confirmed it. She didn't speak, because that was the truth. When I was only Adrian, the engineer, I wasn't enough. When a general announced my name, suddenly everyone listened. My mother stood. I lost my son. I looked at her. No, I said. You lost the version of me who kept waiting. That sentence hurt both of us. Because it was true. The old Adrian would have forgiven everything. The old Adrian would have returned immediately. The old Adrian would have convinced himself family mattered more than pride. But that man was gone. Before leaving, my mother stopped at the door. Do you hate me? I looked at her. No. She seemed surprised. Then what do you feel? I thought about it. For years, I wanted revenge. I wanted them to regret everything. But standing there, I realized something. I didn't want them to suffer. I wanted them to understand. I feel disappointed. Her eyes lowered, because disappointment was heavier than anger. Anger meant I still expected something. Disappointment meant I accepted reality. After she left, Elena entered. She came here to bring you back. I nodded, and I looked at the Grey Haven logo outside the window. I told her the truth. What truth? I smiled slightly, that I already came back. Elena understood, because this wasn't about returning to a position. It was about finally owning my life. The next morning, General Hale sent the final investigation update. Daniel's actions were only the beginning. The deeper investigation had uncovered something much bigger. Hidden failures, false reports, years of decisions made to protect reputations instead of people. And at the center of it all was the family and company that thought they could control my future. But they forgot one thing. They could take away my title. They could ignore my work. They could choose someone else. But they could never erase the truth, because the truth had already been built by me. The final investigation report was released 3 weeks later, and when it reached my desk, I didn't feel excitement. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel the victory everyone expected me to feel, because by then, I already knew something important. The truth doesn't need revenge. The truth only needs time. The report was more than 200 pages. Inside were years of decisions, years of ignored warnings, years of people choosing convenience over responsibility. And at the center of everything was one simple fact. Aegis Lattice had never failed because the technology was flawed. It failed because the wrong people were trusted with it. Daniel's mistakes were the first thing revealed. The investigation confirmed that he had authorized unauthorized modifications to the system. He changed the authentication sequence. He bypassed safety procedures. He ignored warnings from engineers who understood the risks. But the most damaging discovery wasn't the mistake itself. It was what happened afterward. Daniel tried to hide it, not because he wanted people to get hurt, but because he was afraid. Afraid that everyone would finally discover what I had known for years, that he wasn't the genius everyone believed he was. He was standing on a foundation he didn't build. When the news reached the Cole family, everything changed. For years, my mother protected Daniel. She defended him. She believed he was the future of our family. But now, she had to face the truth. The son she spent years protecting had nearly destroyed the project. The son she kept pushing aside had saved it. High-End Defense called an emergency board meeting. Richard Voss arrived with a team of lawyers. His confidence was gone. The same man who once offered me a meaningless title after rejecting my promotion now sat across from me asking for help. Adrian. He looked exhausted. We need to discuss the future of Aegis. I looked at him calmly. The future. He nodded. High-End wants you back. I almost smiled, because I remembered those words. Not the words themselves. The timing. They didn't want me when I asked for a chance. They wanted me when they needed a solution. What position? Richard hesitated, then said, Executive Director of Aegis. The position I had fought for. The position Daniel received. The position my mother said I wasn't ready for. I looked at him, and if the system never failed. Richard didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew. I would still be the engineer, still working behind the scenes, still watching someone else receive the credit. I appreciate the offer. Richard looked relieved. Then you will return. I shook my head. No. His expression changed. Adrian. I interrupted. You're offering me the position because you need me. Silence. But years ago, I wanted the position because I believed I had earned it. I leaned forward. There is a difference. Richard looked down. For once, he didn't have an argument. Grey Haven continued growing. But I changed one thing. I refused to build another company where one person held too much power. I created an independent safety board. I transferred critical technology oversight to a group of experts. I made sure nobody, including me, could ever ignore warnings just because they were inconvenient. Elena questioned my decision. You realize most founders spend their lives trying to gain more control. I smiled. Control is useful. I looked at the new Grey Haven structure. But unlimited control is dangerous. She nodded. You really changed. I looked at her. No. I smiled. I finally became who I was supposed to be. A month later, I attended the Senate defense hearing. Not as a victim, not as someone seeking revenge, but as the person responsible for explaining what happened. The room was filled with officials, military leaders, and executives, people who once didn't know my name. Now everyone did. A senator looked at the documents. Dr. Cole, why did you resign before this crisis happened? I thought about giving the simple answer. I was tired. I was betrayed. I was ignored. All true, but incomplete. I resigned because I realized something. The room became quiet. I had spent years protecting a system. I paused, but I failed to protect myself. Nobody spoke. I believed loyalty meant enduring anything. I looked down briefly. But loyalty without respect becomes self-destruction. After the hearing, I walked outside. Reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions came from every direction. Dr. Cole, do you blame your family? Do you blame high-end defense? Do you think your mother betrayed you? I stopped. For a moment, I thought about everything. The rejection letters, the stolen credit, the years of silence. Then I answered. My family made choices. I looked at the cameras. So did I. A reporter asked, what choice did you make? I smiled. The choice to stop asking people who doubted me for permission to succeed. That evening, my mother came to Grey Haven one last time. Not as a board member, not as a powerful executive, just as my mother. She stood outside my office. Can I come in? I nodded. She sat down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she placed something on my desk. A photograph, me and my father, from when I was a child. He would be proud of you. I looked at the photo, then at her. I know. She looked surprised. I continued, because he believed in me before I achieved anything. Her eyes filled with tears. I should have done that. I didn't answer, because some wounds don't disappear just because someone finally understands them. Do you hate me? She asked again. The same question. The same uncertainty. I looked at the woman who raised me. No. She looked relieved. But I continued. I forgive you. A tear fell from her eye. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. She nodded slowly, because she finally understood. She didn't lose me because I became successful. She lost me because she refused to believe in me before I became successful. Years later, people would tell the story differently. They would talk about Adrian Cole, the engineer who built revolutionary defense technology, the founder who created a billion-dollar company, the man who saved a military program after being pushed aside. But they always missed the most important part. I wasn't successful because I finally proved them wrong. I was successful because I stopped needing them to be right about me. The last time I visited Falcon Joint Test Base, I stood beside the same runway where Daniel had taken my promotion, the same place where my mother signed the 5th rejection, the same place where everyone thought I had lost. General Hale stood beside me. You know, she said, most people spend their lives trying to prove their enemies wrong. I looked at the aircraft in the distance. I wasn't trying to prove them wrong. She smiled. What were you trying to do? I looked at the sky. I was trying to remember who I was before they convinced me I wasn't enough. The wind moved across the runway, the same runway where I once walked away carrying a cardboard box. But that man was gone. The engineer who waited for approval. The son who begged to be recognized. The brother who accepted being second. He was gone. In his place stood someone who finally understood the truth. My value was never determined by the people who failed to see it. Because before my family rejected me, before my company underestimated me, before the world learned my name, I had already built something that could never be taken away. My legacy.